All right, hey, I'm Jeff Baumgartner with Light Reading. I'm joined by Craig Thomas with the Broadband Forum. We're here at Network X around nearby Dallas, I guess.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Yeah, so it's good to see you. Thanks for spending some time with me. Before we dig in, though, give me a sense of like what are your top priorities right now at the Broadband Forum?
So we continue to do what we've always done very, very well, which is drive the broadband ecosystem and enable that connectivity. So taking the standards that you may see embedded in chipsets and building for service providers how to deploy an end-to-end broadband environment. But where we're seeing a change now is we're 90% there of solving the connection problem. But now a lot of the focus is moving what I'm calling to services-led broadband. How do service providers start to make additional revenue and opportunities from that broadband ecosystem they've invested in?
So going beyond the speeds and feeds and pricing that we tend to focus on a lot. Yeah.
We always have.
Right.
You know, it's a zero-sum game where you've been looking at more speed for the same price, and we're getting to the stage now that the speed itself is no longer the inhibitor to the services. So what are the services on top of that that is going to add value to that broadband experience?
Right, and I think here at the show, we've already heard a lot about that idea, because today at the event, they were talking about how to get more out of the broadband connection, add layers of services and applications. How do you make it put the consumer in control on a lot of things? And there was a lot of discussion on Purple here, and we had executives from Orange, Verizon, AT&T, pretty much saying that they're going to get really behind Purple, right? And I think there was an event here on that exact topic just this week. So, you know, I guess what was that about? Are they getting to like consumer or operator adoption on this, or kind of what's the Purple connection in all this?
So from a Broadband Forum perspective, Purple Foundation and other bodies like RDK as well, we're working with them. We own and standardized a lot of the data models with something called USP and historically TR69, how to do the device management and monitoring and control. Now where you're seeing with the likes of Purple is they're building the operating systems, the stack, and the open source software. That means that you can add value whether you are the service provider who's traditionally driving it. You mentioned Orange, AT&T, Verizon.
Right.
There's others, you know, the big operators. But a community that brings in the application providers, the chipset SOC providers, building this whole model that means that I can add new services, whether it's in a containerized fashion or whichever fashion you want, rapidly and securely. And that's the model that a lot of the service providers are saying, well, how do I add true value on top of my bundles that I've always done? And that's the great model, and why you're seeing the AT&Ts, Verizons, and Oranges of the world right behind it.
And it gets them out of the proprietary world, right? Because I think the gentleman from AT&T was talking a lot about that, saying, you know, it's going to be impossible to scale and do the things that we want to do when we have a fragmented and very non-standards based or, you know, open approach, you know, to the problem. You know?
And that's exactly it. You've now got a community with an open source environment that isn't just the service providers. Everyone is going to find maybe little glitches, little patches that are needed and updates as a community. So that suddenly the R&D resources is now X-fold from service providers around the globe, application providers, SOC, as well as the traditional vendors as well.
Right. And the other thing I thought was kind of interesting too, are the different types of applications they're talking about. And some of this is already out there. They're talking about like Wi-Fi management and a lot of different layers of services. But I thought the interesting thing we had talked about was that they can kind of experiment as well. Right?
Yeah.
So they can go and test something in and go, well, it flopped or it was a hit, but they don't have to flip the entire system just to do that, right?
Well, if you look at the traditional model, when it was bundled base, and if you wanted to do an upgrade to your network, it basically meant doing a whole firmware upgrade. You had to do a lot of walled garden environments and sandboxing, maybe a little bit of testing before you rolled it out across the whole network, with maybe some downtime. And therefore, the big service providers could probably only do maybe 3 firmware upgrades a year. Now, if I've got a new service and a new opportunity, if I can drop it down as a container, doesn't affect anything else on that CPE and that operating system, I can be quick to fail or quick to win. Either way, that's the best way for a service provider to go.
Right. Yeah, and that was exactly what they were talking about too. And then they were trying to put a lot of examples there in terms of services and applications that they could pursue. They weren't being real specific, but the idea that, yeah, the sandbox is then open to them essentially, right?
Well, and the whole community. You know, we're doing this for the benefit of the whole community. You have the bundles. I mean, here in the US, maybe the nature of the bundle is changing. You know, there's much more mobile than fixed voice. There's a move to streaming video and Netflix or whatever, as well as the traditional TV, as well as the broadband. That's the one common denominator that changes. On top of that, you're now going to look at, I think, what I call bundle plus services. So if there's a gamer in the home, I can quickly drop a gaming application onto the CPE. If there's a teleworker, I can quickly drop that down. And now you're looking at what are mass niches. Maybe they're not big enough, 20% of homes are gaming homes. So that's not a bundle product where you want 40, 50, 60% of the homes to do it. But I can easily drop those services quickly to the right customer who demands and is willing to pay a little bit more for that gaming or that teleworking, whatever.
Okay. The last thing I want to talk about, we're talking the day before you're presenting here at Network X. So what are you going to talk about? What's going to be the focus, the big takeaway?
So yeah, I'm really lucky to do a keynote tomorrow morning. I'm going to talk about pretty much what we're talking about now. How do we move from a connection-orientated broadband to a services-led broadband? And it isn't just the CPE in the home. You know, what's going to become as important as speed is QoE, latency, the experience. You know, how do we move from that, which has to be an end-to-end solution. It doesn't just sit in the home. How do I QoE in that last mile, in the edge network, all the way through to the cloud services, and make it agile and dynamic so that my network slowly moving toward is more of an autonomous network than a self-build network.
Okay. And what is the biggest challenge then to get additional adoption by service providers, right? Because it seems like pretty much why wouldn't you do it? But you know, even AT&T, they said, well, you know, we started a little bit later than others, but you know, they're definitely on board now. But if there's others that are on the fence about taking an approach with Purple or RDK or you know what have you, I mean, what's the big hurdle for them?
Money speaks. Okay. And that's twofold. When you look at, we did a recent, last year we did a report with Omdia, interviewed 111 of the biggest service providers around the globe and saying, well, what are the services you're going to drive? And there's, in my opinion, a distinct difference of two types of services. One is what is connectivity plus. So how do I do the improved Wi-Fi management? How do I add internet security and things like that, which is more about reducing customer churn, is bundled into the product. And then you're seeing this move now to new services on top, which are, you know, we touched on teleworking, we touched on gaming, lots of other services like that, where there is incremental revenue. Now, first problem is broadband is becoming competitive. Here in North America, you know, the competition is going to be between DOCSIS and fiber and fixed wireless access. You know, that's going to drive down some competitive pricing, not to the degree that we're seeing in other parts of the world where there's been a race to the bottom, but they want to keep the customer. Maybe it's slightly decreased, but they want to keep that customer instead of losing it to an FWA or whatever. Then the equation is, how do I make more revenue and become the trusted provider so that my ARPU is slowly increasing?
Yeah, and this gives them an opportunity to try to innovate that way, right? Yeah. And I think it does fit in. You mentioned ARPU, and it feels like the discussion about broadband, particularly home broadband, has gone from subscriber growth to ARPU and revenues, and this is where, as you call it, connectivity plus fits in, and it's about bundling, you know, enhanced services. And bundling, you know, that's all we're hearing about in streaming as well these days, and so it seems like a pretty good fit. So, all right. Well, Craig, thanks for walking through all that for us, and good luck the rest of the show.
Appreciate it, Jeff. Thanks so much.
Sure thing.
Take care. Yeah.